My name is Jerry Clarke, and I'm the buddy coordinator of the buddy program with the AIDS Project. Essentially, it's a group of volunteers who work one-on-one with our clients, i.e. people who have been diagnosed with either AIDS or ARC. Probably the most frequent question that we get is, well, what do buddies do? And it's probably the most difficult to answer, basically because I think one of the strongest things about the program is that it's relatively unstructured, and one of the most difficult things about the program is that it's relatively unstructured. Essentially, the buddies function in three major areas. They obviously provide a great deal of emotional support, practical support, help with laundry, grocery shopping, that kind of thing, and some purely social things, dinner and a movie, driving out to the beach, getting ice cream, helping someone change their environment a little bit. Even if people have not sat down and worked out a complete scenario, I think almost everybody sort of presumes that they're going to be working with their new best friend, and that the client will be bedridden, and they're going to hold hands and talk about the cosmos, and the person will say, "Thank you, you're a wonderful person," and then pass away of Ali McGraw disease, and it will be a beautiful spiritual experience. And my feeling is that it probably will be a beautiful spiritual experience, but it won't be that one. I mean, we've had an instance of that maybe once, but it tends to be very, very different from that. The reason being that there is no typical client. Everybody says, well, what are the clients like, or what condition are they in? There is no typical client. They can ask at any point in the experience. Some people have just been diagnosed. Some people ask when they're very ill. I would say probably a fair percentage of them ask at the point where the illness has started to impact on their lives in maybe ways that they hadn't ever thought about. I mean, whoever stops to think they're not going to be able to carry their own groceries, or they can carry their laundry downstairs to the washing machine, but they don't have the strength to carry it back up. Sometimes it's easier to ask a stranger to do that than to tell your friends, "I am now too weak to carry my own laundry." The motto of our program is, all you have to do is be a friend. And would that it were that simple. But of course that also starts from the presumption that everything we do as friends is either appropriate or correct, which is certainly a fallacious assumption. The difference, I think, is that even though, as Christopher Spence once said, if you're going to do this kind of work, you have to be prepared to let your heart break a little. There is that emotional involvement, but I think a buddy must keep a certain overview of the total picture. Most of the time, clients ask for a buddy because there's something that they're not getting in their own support system. We don't see very much of the classic case of someone who's been totally abandoned and is totally alone. I don't know if that's education wending its way, or what actually has involved that, but it's very rare that someone is totally alone. Very often, though, their own support system may need a break from the pressure. The pressure can be overwhelming, obviously. Sometimes the lover or the spouse or the family member may be doing, in fact, a wonderful job, but the client really needs to get away and say, what they're doing to me, they're driving me crazy. It's very easy to mythologize this whole experience, and we try very hard from the beginning to get people to get their expectations in order. It's a beautiful, tragic, sad figure to think about the clients being these beautiful, special people who've been cut down in their prime by this dread disease, and of course some of them are. But I think the most important point is not that they're special people, it's that they're just people, with all of the strengths and weaknesses and crazinesses that involves. And not very many people, I think, come into the program realizing that. And even the nicest people, when faced with a life-threatening illness, are going to certainly experience a lot of anger and frustration and need to vent and scream and rail at the cosmos. And if you allow yourself to stand between them and the cosmos, you may get the brunt of all that, but it can serve an incredible function. It's really a gift. I think the hardest thing for a lot of buddies to come to terms with is that they cannot save this person. You can't do anything about the quantity of someone's life, and all you can do is hope to help with the quality. It's very easy to forget that. It's very easy to fall into the trap of not setting limits, to not give yourself permission to say no. As I said, I think the most significant thing about it is that it really is a roller coaster. The ebb and flow of the illness itself is staggering. I mean, the people that you think will never get out of bed may be out pumping iron in 2 weeks. I've seen it happen far more times than I can count. One of the hardest things for buddies is to redefine their sense of what service is, what being of help is. For an awful lot of us, we are only helping if we are carrying someone's groceries, or if we are driving them somewhere, or taking them to a doctor, or rushing them to the paramedics. It's very hard sometimes to understand that just going out to dinner or a movie and not talking about AIDS and just having a drink or just being there while somebody watches television, I mean, that can be an enormous gift, but a lot of times it's very hard for people to understand that. Sometimes it's hard for people also to realize that whether they like it or not, they are a living, breathing, walking, talking icon for the AIDS Project Los Angeles. And if someone has the unmitigated poor taste to get healthy and not want to think about AIDS or deal with AIDS, they may in fact shut the volunteer out for reasons that have nothing to do with the individual. It's complicated. Sometimes the buddies will go to work with a client who is very ill and wants to talk about death and dying issues, or making a will, or funeral arrangements, or the great issues, and then may have, as I say, the unmitigated poor taste to get healthy and really want to talk about Bette Midler's new movie and not deal with those kinds of serious, heavy topics. And sometimes it's very easy for the volunteers to all of a sudden think they're not being of service, they're being used. All he wants to do is go to a movie. What does that mean, And you have to try and talk people through that and ideally get them prepared for it in advance, but it can be real hard to hang on to. I think if we're honest, we volunteer to be buddies for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's building up karma. Sometimes it's bargaining. We're doing our own little bargaining position. Gee, if I do this, maybe I won't, Sometimes it's just genuinely wanting to help, and that feeling is, I think, pretty indescribable. I don't think that there are very many of the buddies, even the ones who have had really extraordinarily difficult situations to deal with, who would not say to you, I've gotten far more out of this than I've ever put into it. I think it's enormously fulfilling. There's a great deal of joy, and there's a lot of laughs if you do it right. I always tell people, if what you're doing with your client is all doom and gloom, you're doing something wrong, because that's not what this program is about. You're sharing a very special journey with someone, and to do that and to be able to put yourself in that position is certainly not something that a lot of people can do. And I think it says a great deal about the individual, and I think that's got to reflect back in one's own self-image, even if you can only do it once. Sometimes people work with the client for a period of time, however long or short, and the client passes away, and they say, that's it, I can't do it anymore. And you have to say, that's okay, you did good, and that's real special. And there are other people who can bounce back from it and go at it again and again and again, and they really work miracles. It's very easy to sit back and say, well, I'm getting to know somebody who may not be around for very long, when in fact what you're also doing is forming a relationship with someone that may last a lifetime. I think you have to have that the ability to keep the whole picture in line.